We are ready tonight to do just a little introduction. That's all it is tonight on the calendar of all calendars is kind of what it's called, and this is the calendar of Yahuah. And like I said, it's just a little introduction tonight on the blueprint for the bride. And why do we say this? Well, because there's a lot of people that say, why do we ever have to study calendar? Like, I just don't get it. But you know what? As soon as you tell them something about the bride, it just seems like their ears perk up and they're all of a sudden interested to find out about the bride. So it's a very simple PowerPoint tonight, only about 36 slides. And let's just go through it and have fun with it and just see how we do. It's all about Yahuah's covenant calendar. And we know that there is a lot of different kind of feast calendars in the world. It seems like in 2018, there was an explosion of feast calendars. And there's many, many more religious calendars. And all of them are claiming that they have the right calendar. They are the ones that know how to mark out the feast days for Yahuah. And they know how to accurately find all of these feast days so that they can be in step with Yahuah. Well, tonight we're going to challenge that because we are saying that this study that is based on the covenant calendar is rooted in the Torah books of Genesis and Exodus. And this is exactly where the book of the covenant is found and named, and it is blood-ratified. So what we're here to tell you tonight at this calendar is not just an ordinary calendar. I believe it is fully blood-ratified, everlasting. It is the calendar that Yahushua had to follow in order to be marked as the true Messiah. It's a little bit of a study to reel back all of the counterfeits, but it is still lots of fun. So I would like you to prayerfully ponder the following information. And we're just going to consider some scriptural titles and expressions. They're your expressions that you've heard before, and these are coming from King James Version language. Now, we like to use the sacred name, Yahuah and Yahusha and Hamashiach, but this tonight, these next few slides are from the King James Version, and you'll see it's for a very specific reason. So I just want you to enjoy it right now, even though you probably really like sacred name. So here's the first slide with titles. Lord of Lords. Psalms 136:3. Oh, give thanks to the Lord of Lords, for his mercy endureth forever. And the question is, who is this Lord of Lords? Well, another title is King of Kings. In 1 Timothy 6:15, it says, which in his times he shall show, who is the blessed and only potentate, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And the question is, who is the King of Kings? Well, let's look at another title, Holy of Holies. I think you've probably heard this before. In 2 Chronicles 5:7, we read, and the priests brought in the ark of the covenant into the most holy place, even under the wings of the cherubims. And the question is, where is this most holy of holies? What would you say in calendar? Another title is Song of Songs. In Solomon 1:1, it says, the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. And in Song of Solomon, chapter 6, verse 3, it says, I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. And I have a question. What is this Song of Songs? And not only that, who is this beloved of beloveds? Who could that be? What about a waiting for that king? Have you ever thought about that? In Revelation 19:7, it tells us, let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife has made herself ready. Why? Because she's waiting for the king. But the question is, who is this bride waiting for her beloved? Who could she be? Well, we are going to talk about a wedding of all weddings. It says in Matthew 23, 22:3, pardon me, and sent forth his servants to call them that were bidden to the wedding. This is the wedding of all weddings. Well, when is it going to happen? And what is it? And do you want to be there? Do you want to know who the bride is? I just have a little clip here from a devotional that I'm reading every day called Day by Day on the Best of Spurgeon, on the love and loveliness of Jesus. That's what it's called. You'll see that at the end of 3 slides. But I just took some things from this because it tells us about our beloved, longing for my beloved. And the scripture was Song of Songs 5:13. And here's what it said. His cheeks are like beds of spice to me. I will put on my best clothes, and I will gather a bouquet of heavenly thoughts of my beloved, because I find all loveliness and joy in him. I see his cheeks so often bedewed with tears of sympathy, and then so cruelly beaten with a rod and defiled with my spittle. Ah, that cheek smiles at me with the most fragrant mercy towards my heart. My beloved, you did not hide your face from shame and spitting. I will always find my dearest delight in praising you. Yes, your cheeks were crimsoned with blood from your thorn-crowned temples. It is these marks of boundless love that attract my soul, far more than the beds of scented herbs. Oh, if I may not see the whole of my beloved's face, then I would be content to behold his cheeks. For the slightest glimpse of him is exceedingly refreshing, and it yields to my spirit a variety of delights. In my beloved, I find not only fragrance, but beds of spice, not from one flower, but all kinds of sweet flowers. He is my rose, he is my lily, and my violet, and my cluster of henna. When you are with me, my beloved, my soul goes forth to wash my happy face in the morning dew of your grace. If I may not see the whole of your face, allow me to behold your cheeks, oh my precious beloved. I long for you. Let me truly know the blessedness that dwells in abiding through unbroken fellowship with you until that wedding day of all weddings in the universe. And my beloved says, well done, daughter, come. And I respond, yes, I will come. This is just part of one of the readings from this beautiful book on who is the beloved. And when you start to read about who our Yahushua HaMashiach really is, that he is the bridegroom. The bride wants to be ready for him. So this is what the calendar is all about. Walking in his steps, following his instructions, because she wants to have that relationship restored with her beloved. But there's a wedding. And how does she save the date? Because this is a wedding of all weddings that the bride is looking forward to. Well, she needs to understand how to calculate those festival appointed times. Where? On a pagan calendar? On a Jewish calendar? What kind of calendar? No, it is her beloved's calendar. That's what she wants to know, on his time frame, not hers. And that's why this study is going to be called the calendar of all calendars. And when you study the covenant calendar, you will find why this is the most incredible calendar to study. We're going to take a very brief look tonight at the blood covenant calendar of Moses. This is where it all begins, when Moses starts writing things down right there in Genesis 1. And we want to be just as a little child. We want to hear and we want to obey. We want to hear the Torah, we want to listen to the Torah, and we want to follow the Torah of Yahuah. And I cannot tell you how many people that I end up talking to through email and through telephone, that when I hear their voices and they hear part of this message, they say, you know what, it rings of truth. I just want truth. That's what we all want, and that's what the bride wants. She says, I just want truth. I just want what Yahushua has for me to follow. In Matthew 18:4, whatsoever therefore shall humble himself as this little child, the same is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. So tonight we're just going to be like little children. We're going to come and hear, and we want to set our hearts to obey. But you know, for some people, it's really hard to figure out what to obey when it seems like they look at calendars and there is nothing but incredible confusion. And it happened to me. It happens to a lot of us. You go start looking for different scriptural calendars out there, and you begin to wonder if anyone knows which one is right. And some of the problems come up like this, because some begin their festal calendars with the moon date that's closest to the equinox or the equilux. And then there's other calendars that begin with the first moon after the equinox or the equilux. That's different. And then there's some that say that the moon phase has to be the sighting of the first sliver moon, or you don't have the right calendar. And then the next person comes along and says, no, 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 that's completely wrong. You have to watch for the conjunction. And that's the dark part of the moon, that dark moon phase. And before you hardly even turn around, someone else has come and they said they're just absolutely sure that the moon has to be a full moon to begin the calendar month. Oh, a full moon. Well, I never heard of that. But there are those out there. And the list goes on and on and on. There's all kinds of ways to calculate a feast calendar. And there's barley in there, and there's all kinds of things. So the first assessment that we have to think about is all of these calendars, and I've only mentioned a few, cannot be right. Because for one thing, the equinox is completely different than the equilux. So all these calendars cannot be right. But there is also a second assessment. And I had to come to this point along with Tim. We had to say all of these calendars could be completely wrong. Now that's a possibility as well. So it was about back in 2013 or 2014 when we said, is there a solution to this dilemma? Can anybody answer a question like this? Well, we started looking and discovered that it doesn't matter what kind of a calendar you're looking at, whether it's Hebrew roots or Messianic or a pagan calendar or a barley calendar or what kind of calendar, every kind of calendar has certain characteristics. They will have day starts and day lengths. They will have a month start and month length. They will have year start and year, and they will have worship days on them. And they usually have appointed times and special holidays. Well, guess what? Those just happen to be the components of the covenant calendar that was given by Moses. He's got a day start and a day length so that you know what to do. He tells you when the month starts and he tells you how long it is. And Moses has also written down when the year begins and how long the year is. And of course, there's worship days and those appointed times. And they're all rooted in covenant Torah. We're going to talk about that as well. So as we go ahead in this study, it's just very, very brief. The focus of this study is going to be day start, month start, and year start. We're just going to touch the tip of the iceberg here. And I will just kind of give you a hint. Day start is probably the easy part to start. Month start is a little bit more difficult. And I would say that the year start is a moderate learning activity. But why in the world is a calendar study so important? Well, remember, the bride needs to know the date of her wedding. And if she doesn't know what calendar to use, and if she doesn't know how to work it or how to count, she won't know the date of her wedding. It's just that simple. And every bride that I have seen always knows the date of her wedding. It's not the other way around. In fact, she's the one that announces the date of the wedding. So we're going to start off with some important questions. In the calendar studies, there's always lots of questions that we always look at. There are so many different scriptural calendars out there, so how are we supposed to know which one is right? I'm just an ordinary student. How can I figure it out? Well, for the day start, Some of the calendars follow sunset to start their day. Rome follows midnight to start their day. Some even follow sunrise. Some follow dawn, twilight, and a long time ago, some started their Sabbaths and their feasts with 6 o'clock in the evening. So how can we be sure what to follow? There's all kinds of choices out there. For the month start, there's a lot of variations using this moon. And how can one know which variation is right? And how can you be absolutely sure that you choose the right one no matter what? And then the year start. This one's really big. And between all of these different combinations, can the year really begin either before or after the equinox? Or what about that equilux? And surely every combination can't be right. And some of them are doing something else totally different than Sabbath start. There's also variations there as well. There are many variations now about when the Sabbath begins and when the Sabbath actually is during the week. Lots of them are saying lunar Sabbaths, or lots of them are counting their calendars from some date that they start their calendar, and they say that's a no day, and they count 7 days, and then this is Sabbath. Now, who's going to sort out that problem? So all of these calendar issues are affected in many different ways, and that also tampers with the proper commencement times for the appointed times of worship for Yahushua HaMashiach. And again, is there really a solution? And we're here to say tonight, yes, Moses has the answer in his Torah books, and all of the answers are firmly given in Yahuah's covenant. You're not going to believe how easy this is. So, where is Yahuah's Book of the Covenant? This is really strongly linked to the Book of the Covenant. And this is probably a very important slide. Yahuah's Book of the Covenant, that is blood-ratified, everlasting, is found between the pages of Genesis 1 and Exodus 24:11. In my Bible, that's only 75 pages, the first 75 pages of the Torah. His covenant calendar is grounded, well grounded in Genesis and Exodus, right up to verse 24:11. The day, or Yom, is given on the first day of creation, right there in Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 to 5. Tells you all about where the day start is and how long it is. The month, which is Kodesh, is found in Genesis chapters 7 and 8. That's part of Noah's flood. And the first 3 months, including those appointed times in the first 3 months of the calendar, are found in Exodus chapter 3 to 20. And the year beginning is in Exodus 12:2, where Yahuah told Moses, this is the beginning of your year. All of these can be found. This is the foundation of the whole covenant calendar, right between Genesis 1 and Exodus 24:11. This is just a little short outline for understanding Yahuah's covenant calendar. And it's just a very brief outline. But for day start, you can find the first day of creation has easily got lots of information for day start and day length. And then Day of Atonement has some very interesting information about day start. That's one that's a little tricky for a lot of people, but it is very important. For the calendar month count, there's lots of evidence in Genesis 7 and 8 with Noah and his flood account. And then in Exodus 12, you find evidence for the first month of the year, which is at Passover, when you're coming out of Egypt there with Moses. Exodus 16 shows you about the second month, and it talks about the quail and the first man a week. And then when you're into Exodus 19, you've got your third month there, which is Pentecost at Mount Sinai. It's really an exciting journey. But what about the year start? Well, back in Exodus 12, when Moses was asked to celebrate the first Passover of coming out of Egypt, right there in Exodus 12, Yahuah said, this is where your year starts. Year Sheneh with the Tekufa, or equinox, is translated in English. There's a lot of work on the moon and the calendar's relationship to the moon, and it's an Old Testament study, and there's 10 very, very detailed PowerPoints called The Moon, Oh the Moon, if you want to find out all about the moon and why it is not part of Yahuah's calendar for telling us when the worship statutes start. The moon is really important. It is given for ordinances, but not for worship statutes. And we are so thankful that Moses has preserved the covenant calendar with his writings in the Torah. He has it all written down. So I just want to give you a little understanding for where you can find day start from the Torah books. Now, we have two columns here. One is about the day start witnesses that you will find in the Book of the Covenant, Torah covenant pages is what I call it, and this is between Genesis 1 to Exodus 24:11. After Exodus 24:11, on the right-hand side, we are going to look at some witnesses that come from the Torah, starting at Exodus 24:12 to the end of Deuteronomy. And these are the pages where you find the Book of the Law. Now, I just want to clarify that there is lots of covenant instructions in these pages as well, but this is where the Book of the Law begins to show up. So let's just take a little peek, just do a little trip around these books here and find out where our day start studies are in the Torah books. Well, the first one is in Genesis 1. It's on the first day of creation. The next one that we have found is in Genesis 15, and this is about Abraham's covenant with Yahuah. Remember when he walked through the sacrifices. This was a very wonderful covenant. The next study is Genesis 19 about Lot and his daughters. Very interesting study about day start. Uses the word yesternight, which has a very interesting word. And then Genesis 31, Laban and Jacob. They are there with a testimony for the day start. You will also find 4 components in this study that show you what the Book of the Covenant is all about. Beautiful study. The next one is found in Exodus 10, and it's about the locust plague. The locusts tell us when the day begins. Then in Exodus 12 is Passover out of Egypt, and definitely this is an important chapter to show you when the day begins and when the day ends. In Exodus 14, we're at the Red Sea crossing. This is another exciting study that shows you when the day begins and the day ends. If you haven't seen it, it is goosebumpy. It's wonderful. And then Exodus 16, we don't want to miss out on the quail and the manna. Excellent study for showing when the day begins and when the day ends. That's already 8. Number 9, from Genesis 1 to Exodus 24:11, remember? Exodus 19 is a day start study on Pentecost at Mount Sinai. It is also including the month study. So we have 9 witnesses right there between Genesis 1 and Exodus 24:11. 9 witnesses in Book of the Covenant pages, Torah covenant pages for day start, and that's a lot. We will continue with our day start studies, looking at past Exodus 24:11. In Leviticus 7, there's a study about permission to eating. Eating what? When can we eat and when do we not eat? Interesting enough, it's a study on when the day begins. And Leviticus 23, of course, that's Day of Atonement, and we all need to know that. When does the day begin? That's a really important study. Numbers chapter 9 has a day start study about the Passover in the 2nd month. Well, I would say that's a lot of witnesses just from 5 Torah books. But do you notice that the majority of the witnesses are out of the first column? That is very important. We have 9 witnesses of the day start in the section where you find the Book of the Covenant that is blood-ratified. So I just would like you to hang on to that little piece of information. This might be a little bit confusing, so I want to show you how the day start studies are found in Scripture in comparison between the Old Testament and the New Testament. We've already done some of this, but we've done the Covenant Torah books. Remember, from Genesis 1:1 to Exodus 24:9, there were 9 studies found. And then in the non-Torah books, after Exodus 24:12 to the end of Deuteronomy, there were 3 studies that we have found for day start. So you have a total of 12 studies for the day start right there in the Torah books. And we all know you need at least 2 or 3 witnesses to say that the scripture that you're finding is a truth. So between the covenant Torah books and the non-covenant Torah books, look at this. Covenant Torah books have 75% of the witnesses for day start. And the non-covenant Torah books are 25%. That makes 100% there in Torah. In the Old Testament, I have not given a detailed list tonight, but at this date, we have found about 16 studies that support the day beginning in the morning at the first twilight. So a total in the whole Old Testament, there are 28 day start studies. When you compare that with the New Testament, there are 7 studies in the New Testament that we have found that support the day start. It could be more by now, but this is when I made this chart, for a total of 35 scriptures in the whole Bible that give you day start witnesses. So basically, the Old Testament is containing 80% of your day start studies. The New Testament has 20% as witnesses, together for 100%. So you can see with just a glance that the day start studies that were given by Moses are right up there with the covenant Torah books, with Genesis 1:1 to Exodus 24:11. That's where you find the greatest majority. Very interesting. So the foundation for the day start studies are definitely found in covenant Torah and in Torah books. That's where they're found percentage-wise. And many witnesses are found in the Old Testament. Those are testimonies to what you have found in Torah. Those non-Torah books are always having to testify of what is found in Torah. Their testimonies have to agree. And of course, the New Testament witness has to support covenant Torah and the non-Torah books, and that's just the way it works. Well, I shared this piece of information with somebody a couple of years ago, and I would like you to come along with me and make a reasonable assumption. This little chart here is going to represent the Genesis 1 calendar in chapter 1, and I have some questions because I said to this gentleman, when does the first day of Yahuah's calendar begin? Now this was a person that was watching, not watching, but keeping the moon month, and we all know that the moon didn't show up here until the 4th day. And so my question to him was this: is the first day of creation also the first day of the first week of creation? It's a question, and it's just a very simple question. Well, he didn't say too much, but then my second question is this: is the first day of creation also the first day of the first month of creation? Well, my friend didn't like that either. And then I said, I have one more question. And here it is. Is the first day of creation also the first day of the first year of creation? And at that point, my friend got very angry at me. And I'm sad to say that this is what he said to me: I have never heard such ridiculous questions in all my life. That is absolutely ridiculous. And he hung up the phone. And I was scratching my head to think, what was wrong with that? Is it not the very first day of creation that starts the first day of the week? Isn't it the first day of creation that starts the first day of the first month? And surely the first day of creation should start the first day of the first year. In fact, every calendar does that, whether it's Yahuah's calendar, a pagan calendar, a Jewish calendar, a Hebrew, any calendar does that. When you have the first day of the year, this is where everything starts. So I would like you to keep those concepts in mind for all of the studies when you're working on calendar. It's really important that we learn to use our logic and our common sense. So where is the best place to begin to understand the covenant calendar study? What would you say? Well, I say that's a very good question, and the best place to start is at the beginning. That's the only place to start. So let's take a sneak peek at the first day of creation and see what we can find. We just have a couple of slides, very, very briefly, showing when the first day of creation begins. Is it at night? Is it at evening? Is it at darkness? Or what is it? So here we go. These are the 4 components that you will find when you read the first 5 verses in Genesis. It will talk about light. It will talk about evening. It will mention night, and it will mention morning. And we are here to tell you that the word evening is the foundation for Yahuah's covenant calendar. Everything about this calendar study rests on the word evening. It is the most important cornerstone part of the whole teaching. Hard to believe, but it is true. So if you don't understand the word evening, you will have mass confusion. Let's see what else we can find. In the first part of Genesis 1:5, on the very first day of creation, says that the light is called day. So right here in the very beginning of verse 5, we have a definition. This is a definition, and the light was called day. We are getting definitions, so important to understand. And then it says, and the darkness was called night. This night, though, we have to remember as we go through the studies, is not the same as the darkness up there in Genesis 1:2. That is a different darkness. This darkness is Lael. So in the very beginning part of verse 5, Yahuah gives us definitions for day and night. He says day, the light is called day, and the darkness is called night, or Lael. And then in the last part of verse 5, that's where Yahuah is addressing twilights. So now we know that we have a day season. We know that the light is called the day, and we have a night season, and the darkness is called the night. I believe it's Jeremiah that talks about the day season and the night season in their order. This is a covenant of the day and a covenant of the night that Jeremiah is telling us about, a very special covenant, a calendar covenant that was given on the first day of creation. Is extremely important. But now we're going to look at the twilights. The very first twilight that Genesis on the first day of creation mentions is the evening twilight. And guess what? It contains some light, because evening is a mixture of light and night. It's the light that belongs to the day season. So evening twilight belongs to the day season. If it has light, as long as it has light. And then it tells us about the morning twilight. And morning twilight is the same. It's a mixing of light and night. And this light of the morning also belongs to the day season. It's part of the day component. Yes, the twilights, they are mixtures of light and night, evening twilight and morning twilight. Morning and evening twilights are always defined as belonging to the day season. Why would that be? This is the reason why. Because light or twilight is never defined as belonging to the night season. There is no light from the sun in the night season. It's dark. We're talking about light from the sun, not light from the stars, but light from the sun. So the last part of Genesis 1:5 is not a definition for when the day begins, because remember what it says, and the evening and the morning were the first day. It sounds like that's when the day begins, but that is not the case, because Yahuah is giving us definitions of what these terms mean and where they belong. This last part of Genesis 1:5 is a definition of where these twilights belong, whether they belong to the day or belong to the night. So if you were to rephrase the last part of Genesis 1:5, it could be said like this: and the evening and the morning are part of the first day. Why? Because they belong to the day season and not the night season. This is not a definition for when the day begins. Yes, and we do have some instruction from King David as well. He has told us in Psalms 90, verse 12, and I love this verse. So teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom. And you know what, everyone? If you know how to count out Yahuah's days correctly, then you can count out the whole covenant calendar. In fact, a child can do it. It's so easy. Remember that little child? That's how easy it is. So for covenant calendar, we just learn to count the days. And these are some of the days that you want to know how to count. You have to know how to count 1 to 3.5 to find the midst of the week. And you have to know how to count 1 to 7 to find the weekly Sabbath. How about counting 1 to 30 to find the end of 1 month? And then you need to know how to count 1 to 50 to find first fruits and wave sheep to get to Pentecost. And certainly if you can do that, you can count 1 to 12 to number the months of the year. And all in all, we need to know how to count 1 to 360 for 1 full year of 12 months of Yahuah's calendar. And then when you get to the 360, all you have to do right now is to wait until the equinox resets the year. That's how easy this is. This calendar has absolutely nothing to do with looking to the sun to start your day. You look to the light in the first thing in the morning. This calendar has nothing to do with looking to the moon to tell the month. When you get to the first day of your year, you just start counting 30, and then you start your second month counting 30, and you number your feasts and festivals according to the months and the days. It's really, really easy. And all of the studies can be found for all of the details on Calendar Club. So the covenant calendar in a nutshell is a blood-ratified calendar in the Melchizedek priesthood. Why are we saying that? Here is the reason why. Because Yahushua, our Melchizedek priest, when he gave his sacrifice, he had to die on his Passover, on his calendar. It could not be on a Passover on any counterfeit calendar. Because, friends, if he chose a Passover on another calendar, he would have disqualified himself as the Messiah, the true Messiah. He had to die on the Passover that he gave instructions for all the way back to Exodus 12. That's why this is so important, because your master, your beloved, your bridegroom, he died on his calendar, and he blood ratified it with his own blood. That's the important part. And don't forget, we're going to do a little review here. This calendar is completely found, the foundation building blocks of covenant calendar are completely found between the Genesis 1 to Exodus 24:11 covenant Torah pages. We've coined that term special for this study. Covenant Torah pages. There is not one counterfeit calendar that can meet these strict requirements and guidelines. Not one, because covenant calendar can detect a counterfeit with nothing, no problem at all. So here we go. The day, you find that right there in Genesis 1:1 to 5, where it tells you that the day begins with light. It's not sunset and it's not sunrise, but it's the first light in the morning when the sun's rays hit the atmosphere, and you can see the first light, and you bet your boots the birds are going to be singing. The month is found in Genesis 7 and 8 with Noah's flood account. The very first one that you'll find is in Genesis 7:11. It says the second month and the 17th day. And then when you look at Genesis 8:4, it talks about the 7th month and the 17th day. This is all about math. Just do the subtraction, and what do you have? It tells us 2 times in Genesis 7:24 and 8:3 that this equals 150 days, and it tells you it's 5 months. And do the math, it's 30 days each. It's just that simple. And we all know that our months always have 30 days. Yahuah's month always has 30 days, no matter what the moon is doing right now. For the year start, you find that in Exodus 12, verse 2. Shanei is the Hebrew word for year. Yahuah said this is when your year begins, right now. And that is going to be with the spring equinox. We find the Tekufah, and then we begin our year. Now some say No, the year starts with the barley. But don't forget that in Exodus 9:31, we were told that the barley was struck down. So there was no starting the year with barley. Also, Acts 7:22 is one of those scriptures that you want to remember. It says that Moses was trained in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. Well, guess what? It was Joseph that raised the pyramids that are still standing today that can tell you the equinox every single year without missing a beat. Those pyramids are standing there as 500 million trillion tons of rock to tell you when the equinox starts. Also, the sanctuary was set up so that it could determine the day of the first day of the year. Exodus 34:22 talks about the fall equinox. Now, this is in Torah only. This is not covenant Torah, but it is in Torah pages where Yahuah has given us instructions for the fall equinox. It talks about the harvest. The calendar year has 360 days. We have 365 right now. It doesn't matter because Yahuah's feasts and festivals are all contained, the annual ones, all contained within those 360 days. When we get to the end of the 360th day count, we just wait. We're waiting and watching for that shadow to tell us when the equinox occurs. One of these days, there will be no waiting. It will just happen. Yahuah will bring us back to a 360-day calendar because he says you can know the end from the beginning. And we also know when we study the Revelation timelines with John and also Daniel timelines, that all of the timelines are built on a 360-day year and 12 months. There's never 13 months. But Moses has two commands that the 613 never ever talk about. And we just want to mention this before we close. Moses has two very strict commands found in Deuteronomy 4:19 and also 15 to 19. Those verses 15 to 19 are very important because he said there is to be no gazing at the sun, the moon, the stars, the heavenly hosts, nothing. You are not to cast your eyes upon any of the heavenly bodies in the skies. And he said, the reason why is because you will be attracted into setting your worship statutes according to what you see by the sun and the moon. He said, don't do it. And then it is repeated in chapter 17, verses 2 to 5. The very same thing, except for with a little bit of extra instruction, and that is that if you get caught doing this, looking to the sun for your day start, looking to the moon for your month start, or whatever you might be doing, he says there is a death penalty, and it will be stoning. And if you see somebody doing it and you don't report it, you get stoned with them. So it was a pretty serious death decree. These commands of Moses were, interestingly enough, left out of the 613. So what I think is that no judgment could be brought against the Jewish culture because there's nothing in those 613 that says that they can't look to the sun or the moon for their day start and their month start. It's pretty serious. What does Solomon say in Proverbs 18:13? He says, he that answereth a matter before he hears it, it is folly and shame unto him. We need to have calendar answers from the scriptures and not just, well, he said or she said, or the Jews have to know because they've been keeping the calendar. No, you want to know if your calendar that you're keeping is the bride's calendar for the bridegroom. And in Proverbs 25:2, it is the glory of Yahuah to conceal a thing, but it is the honor of kings to search out the matter. Calendar has been buried for a long, long time, but it's not anymore. Yahuah has concealed it because he's saving it for his bride. He's saving it for his people that want to come into alignment with Yahushua HaMashiach. They want to be restored in relationship with him. They want to walk out his statutes every bit of the way, and they will search this out and they will find it. You know what? There's lots of questions on many individual topics within the calendar study. Most of the questions are about the counterfeits. That's where the work is, to tear away the counterfeits from this beautiful calendar that is so simple and easy to understand. There's lots of information at the Covenant Calendar website. Go and look at the videos, the YouTubes, the PowerPoints or the PDFs and print them off and study them. It's at the website, studythecalendar.com. There's all kinds of resources there. And we really do encourage people to ask questions. Those are so important. That's how you learn. You must ask your questions if there's something you don't understand. So we invite everybody to have a chance to look at these studies and assess them for themselves. Are they true or are they not true? You are the one that has to make the decision.